Now I request Dr. Sailendraji to introduce today's first speaker, Dr. Ramanjaneyulu.
Yeah,
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Namaskar, friends. I'm Shailen. I'm also one of the team member associated with the implementation of this week-long training program on natural farming. As Mihir sir mentioned, so he probably gave us the background that why we need to think about some concept like natural farming, because it's very important to provide farmers with some alternative they can think of, particularly with the background Mihir sir just mentioned that when you are speaking about this input intensive agriculture, many times you are not able to help farmer reap better income, and it is also having some negative impact on the resources that we are using. It may be soil, it may be water. So with that background, it's very important to introduce you to some alternatives. And one of the alternatives that we are speaking about today is this natural farming. So in the next session, we are going to cover the conceptual understanding when we speak about natural farming, ecological principles and differences in various practices, because when you are speaking about natural farming, it's again not like a uniform approach that will be observed throughout the country. In different part of the country, during the course of this program, you will understand different states are practicing natural farming. And when we are speaking about natural farming, there is though the basic principles will remain same, but in terms of application and practices that you are following, you will observe some sort of variation. So it's very important to understand what are those principles, what are those practices that bring in the difference, and overall, what is this concept of natural farming. And to speak on this, we are having with us Dr. G.V. Ramanjaneyulu. Welcome, sir. So before I invite Ramu sir to speak you on this concept of natural farming, I would like to introduce him briefly. So Ramanjaneyulu sir is PhD in agriculture from IRI, and before that he completed MSc in agriculture, BSc in agriculture from College of Agriculture, Bapatla, Andhra Pradesh, and he is having very diverse experience. After completing his PhD, he joined Indian Revenue Services, subsequently in Agriculture Research Services, ARS. And after that, he started working for this organization, CSA. He is working as Executive Director of CSA, Center for Sustainable Agriculture. And primarily, he is working with farmers in different states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, on policy issues, on the strategy to reduce the use of chemicals. So again, you have to understand that when we are speaking about, as Mihir sir mentioned, that when we are speaking about alternatives, so natural farming is one of the approach, but there can be so many other alternatives that we can offer to our farmer to reduce the use of chemicals, improve their income, and negative impact that will come on the resources. And he is also working on a strategy to offer some sort of solution to the farmer. He is associated, or the CSA is promoting one organization, Sahaja Aram, that basically has helped that farmer producer organization, Sahaja Aram, in providing end-to-end solution to the farmer. They are aggregating produce, processing it, and then through their own network of retail chain, they are providing market integration to these member farmers. So market information, again, we know is very important. So his organization is also working on market organization. Then he is having a number of awards to his credit. He is author of several books. In fact, the initiative of his organization to promote practices to reduce the use of chemicals has been presented through one of the episodes of Satyamev Jayate. So he is having so many things to his credit to help farmer get integrated with market, to help farmer get better income from the same level of resources. Ramanjaneyulu sir, over to you.
I'll focus on how we should understand organic and natural farming approaches in agriculture, and particularly when there is a lot of hype and then interest in the government and people to move towards natural farming. There is also a kind of differences of opinion about what constitutes natural farming, what constitutes organic farming, and that differences have grown to a better stage where people started criticizing each other. And similarly, India has a long history of trying out alternatives. So, what do we actually learn from alternatives, either tried nationally or internationally? Dr. Mihir has rightly pointed out, we need to take a very scientific approach for any transition we are making, and particularly learning from what we have already done. So that's where I start my presentation. So CSA works in 12 states across the country. We work directly with about farmers, in which 25,000 farmers are fully organic and 75,000 are part of FPOs who are in the process of transition. And we also are a resource organization for about 150 FPOs in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra, and northeastern states. And our main learning ground is in Andhra, Telangana, Maharashtra, where we work directly with the farmers and then extend support services in other states. And we also work on linking farmers to markets, policy research. So these are all some of the activities which we do. And we organize the farmers into clusters, like I mentioned, as a farmers cooperative. So large part of our work is in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Maharashtra. So coming back to the question of why we need to transit towards organic and natural farming, recently we published a report on how each state stands on agriculture. So there is a deep ecological crisis in agriculture. On several parameters, India is really doing bad on ecological parameters. This is a paper which we published recently in the EPW. If you look at on land degradation, if you look at soil organic matter, if you look at groundwater levels, if you look at water contamination, any of these things, it stands really bad. And even the government's data, if you look at, this is a recent data by ISRO on the desertification, and the area under desertification, land degradation is increasing. This is mainly because of the bad practices in agriculture, bad practices in handling land itself. And coming to the fertilizer responsiveness, so Mihir Shahji was rightly mentioning, you have to use more fertilizer to get the same yield today. And the factor productivity of fertilizer has gone down significantly. In 1970, for every 1 kg of NPK use, we used to get 13.4 kg of grain. And by 2005, it is 3.7 kg. And 2011 data shows it is about 2.4 or so. So it is continuously declining. But what is actually declining? Is it the power of chemical fertilizers, or is it the productivity of land? There is a productivity of land which is actually coming down, and this productivity of land is coming down because we narrowly focused on a couple of nutrients, and the rest of the nutrients we completely ignored, and all the other set of nutrients actually comes from the soil. So soil health has deteriorated significantly, and making land more and more unproductive, and we have to use more and more chemical fertilizers in this whole process. And whenever we talk about chemical fertilizers and when we talk about alternatives, the key challenge comes up whether we can meet up we can meet up the food security needs, and as if we can continue the chemical fertilizers forever, which is not true, because the total chemical fertilizers depend on the energy or mining of phosphorus and potash reserves, and the mining of phosphorus and potash reserves has already come down significantly, and probably we may have reserves for another 25 to 30 years. Beyond that, we may not have the natural resources which can be used to make chemical fertilizers of phosphorus and potash. So that door is already closed. And looking at the nitrogenous fertilizer as well, we use a lot of energy to make the nitrogenous fertilizer. So either you use naphtha, coal, or any other energy source, and all these energy sources are also coming down significantly. So it's highly timely. We need to make a transition from dependency on these chemical fertilizers. Abundant supply of these chemical fertilizers are not going to continue for long. Also, they are highly subsidized today. the total chemical fertilizer subsidy is more than 1.3, and one of the chemical fertilizer subsidy goes only for urea. So the large portion of chemical fertilizer used is around 25. The rest of it is which is potentially 310 times dangerous than the carbon dioxide. So if you look at from a climate change point of view, carbon emissions point of view, the GHG emissions from agriculture, while it is about 20%, nearly 20%, methane and nitrous oxide are largely from agriculture. Methane comes from stagnation water, and nitrous oxide comes from the inefficient use of the chemical fertilizer. So these two also we need to address in the process of actually making a transition towards transitions in agriculture towards more sustainability. This whole challenge is about the current model of agriculture cannot be sustained for long, and we invariably have to make a transition if we have to sustain either the farmer's income or the ecological sustainability of sustaining natural resources. Both can only happen if we make a transition. The question and challenge is about what is the transition we are talking about. When we are talking about a transition, we need to move towards an agricultural model which uses less resources, so particularly water, energy, and chemicals. These three we need to cut down on in agriculture today. The crop models we are promoting or the production practices we are promoting both use high water, chemical, and energy use. So that we need to cut down. And there are a number of schools of thought, and then there are a number of practices which have been developed across the country. At the same time, on the economic front, also we need to look at, given the kind of conditions in which farmers are today, what is the best way to reduce the economic cost. Basically, across the country in the last 50-60 years, when we have seen the crisis which Mihir Shahji was talking about in Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, in several places, alternative models also started coming up. So farmers came together, some of the NGOs came together, some networks came together, they all started alternative models. Similarly, there are some states which have started through a policy approach and developing some programs, and alternatively markets also have started and then working towards taking these alternative models forward. And they're called by various names. We call it as agroecological approaches, we call it as biodynamic farming, we call it as climate resilient agriculture, organic farming, permaculture, zero budget natural farming. There are various names of it. So largely, if you see the activism and movement driven approaches were largely led by Organic Farmers Association of India, or people like Subhash Palekar who promoted ZBNF, zero budget natural farming, later on renamed as Subhash Palekar natural farming. And there are also groups in India which works on cow based farming, who believe cow is important part of agriculture, and then sustaining it and integrating into agriculture can solve most of the problems. And there is also a natural farming coalition which Mihir Shahji is chairing. Similarly, on the policy and program driven approaches, Sikkim transited towards fully organic with having a 10 years transition plan. And Andhra Pradesh has a large program called Andhra Pradesh Natural Farming Initiative, Community Managed Natural Farming Initiative. Kerala had an organic farming policy. Likewise, 12 states in the country had organic farming policies. And there were schemes like PKVY, MOVCD, and then now around 1,000 FPOs across the country, which are part of this 10,000 FPOs initiative, are also going organic. So all these initiatives shows that there is a policy intent, but when the policy intent is not converted into an action, and action getting limited by on one side the trained resource persons, on the other hand the larger mainstream system not believing in the model. So because of that, many times many of these alternatives got stuck somewhere. And of course, market-driven approaches went up, and then they're going on. So we have organizations like 24 Mantra, we have Daman Organic, Sahaja, Safe Harvest. There are many other alternative initiatives where we're trying to use market as a driver to make this transition possible. Next, please. Can someone change the slide? Yeah. So here, let me put what are the commonalities and differences between all these approaches. Well, the natural farming largely relies on farm-made products. So at what farmers can make on their own, whether we talk about ZBNF or SPNF, or we talk about Fukuoka method, or we talk about Korean natural farming. So internationally, there are many other models which are called as Cho natural farming. So there are different schools of thought around natural farming, and all of them relies on the farm made products. So the inputs which are used in agriculture are made locally with using the local resources. While organic farming believers and promoters largely also rely on farm-made products, but where they cannot make farm-made products, they also rely on the commercial products. So there are various schools of thought across the country. If you look at Tamil Nadu, Panchagavya, and many other products were promoted. And similarly, in Madhya Pradesh, we have Amrita Jal and many other products which are being promoted. And similarly, Subhash Palekar promoted some products. Yeah, can you make it full slide? Click, please. Next, yeah. Click. If you click, then one by one they will come in. Yeah. So organic farming is the various models we can see, and the biofertilizers and biopesticides, whether they can be made by entrepreneurs, local products commercially available from the institution. So organic farming largely relies on organically produced bioproducts, and they may be produced locally or they may be brought in from outside. So if you look at from natural farming and organic farming, not much difference is seen. In fact, I'll talk about more when we talk about the inputs which are used. So there is no big difference between these two, particularly in the Indian context. Both use more or less same inputs. And the commercial inputs use would be less than 0.1% in this country. The commercial bioproducts input is less than 0.1%. So instead of fighting between what is natural farming and what is organic farming, and then how they differ, I think we should look at commonalities and then move forward on that. Well, while the organic and natural farming definitions are like that, let's look at permaculture. Permaculture relies on the farm design. So based on your landscape, how do you design farm, and then what kind of natural products you can use in that. So focus largely is on the farm design. If you look at biodynamic farming, in addition to relying on natural processes, it also depends on the stellar movements, how the stellar movements affects the agriculture. So if you look at the inputs used in biodynamic farming, the compost, manures, biosprays, all of them are more or less similar to, technically, if you look at what the products they are using, they are more or less similar to products which are used in organic and natural farming. They may be called by different names. I'll also explain what are the commonalities and differences between these products as well. And similarly, when we talk about climate smart agriculture, which many people are now talking about, it largely relies on building resilience to climate. The climate change. So here the main focus is on the mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. May not be so much on the products which are used in agriculture. Similarly, the community managed natural farming, which is largely promoted in Andhra Pradesh, which is which grew from the community managed sustainable agriculture, where NPM was promoted on a large scale, relies on community extension and management system. So it uses CRPs, it uses farmer producer organizations, it uses SHGs. Practices are drawn from many of these schools. Similarly, when we talk about non-pesticidal management, the focus is largely on the ecological pest management, because pesticides are serious problem. So if you look at from all these things, where they started the journey, depending on where they start the journey, the main focus comes in. Rest of all added over a period of time. So rather than looking at the differences in all these things, look at the commonalities. All of them talk about using natural products which are available. If the farmers can make on their own, they can make. Otherwise, they can buy from outside. If they can, that's a fundamental difference between all these things. Next slide, please. So I'd like to summarize the commonalities and differences. The commonalities are about every method, if you talk about permaculture, if you talk about biodynamic farming, or if you talk about natural farming, organic farming, every model talks about increasing cropping intensity through multiple cropping systems. Don't go for monoculture. Monoculture is harmful. So let's move towards multiple cropping systems. And second, it all talks about increasing soil organic matter. Use plant material, use biomass, use animal waste, increase soil organic matter. That's what largely it talks about. And large focus is on increasing soil health, and increasing soil health also, in addition to the microfauna, flora, it is also about microbial population. How do we increase microbial population in the soil? There is a commonality across all these practices. But what are the differences? Differences are about degree of internalization of inputs. While natural farming says they all need to be internalized fully, and some approaches talk about making them locally, and some talk about commercially available. So depending on the farmer's economy and depending on the time farmer can spend on agriculture, farmer can make a choice. Why should we judge the methods based on the degree of internalization? It's always good if everything can be done locally, if by farmer themselves. If the farmer cannot do it, let it be done at the group level. If the group cannot do it, let it be done between the groups, or buy from an external buyer. But the transition towards more using more of bio products in agriculture is something which is very, very important. Another key difference is also about the microbial preparations which people use. Some talks about Jivamrut, Bijamrut, some talks about Panchagavya, another group talks about Amrutajal, another group talks about BD 150. So all these are all microbial preparations, and if you go through the scientific rationality behind all that, more or less they're all same. I'll actually present that what it means actually. Also difference is on the crop choices. See, crop choices should always be on the local conditions, depending on the soil type, depending on the weather conditions, the crop choices should be. So what combination of crops we use? Say if somebody talks about 5-layer model and somebody talks about 10 gunta model, or somebody talks about Navadanya, all these crop choices are to increase the intensity of cropping pattern. So what combination to be used can vary, and what combination can be used depends on the need. So if you increase more of pulses, then your nitrogenous fertilizer use comes down. So your the soil fertility goes up by using more of that. So when we talk about Dabolkar method, Navadanya, or the PMDS, which the government of Andhra Pradesh is now talking about, all of them have the basic principle is same: increase the soil cover. So increase the soil cover. So if we draw principles like that, it becomes much easier for us to see commonalities between these practices and then follow those practices, rather than actually trying to see the differences. But what differs and then what is creating a lot of confusion and I would say even competition is about the narrative. The story, the narratives are is what is creating the problem, and these narratives are saying, say, conventional agriculture is completely damaging, organic farming is more dangerous than natural farming. So those kind of narratives actually create confusion among the people. Let's look at commonalities and key differences, and then keep the differences aside, and then look at what commonalities can help, and then take those things forward. So these narratives, let's not get carried away by narratives, because narratives also comes from their own belief system and also vested interest. So my own interest as an organization, as an individual or a business organization, I will have my own interest as well. So my interest and my belief system is what is my narrative. So don't get carried away by the narratives. Look at what are the commonalities and differences, and let farmers make the choice. Explain them, make them understand what is good for them, and then based on that, let them make the choices. So to take this forward, what is important? What is important is the knowledge. Knowledge on how do I use the resources available for me and what practices I follow is a farmer's knowledge. And all of us together, rather than creating the confusion, can we create a situation and system where people can make their own decision? So how do we improve the decision making behavior of the people is something very, very important. there is a role for community resource persons, there is a role for scientists, and there is also a role for institutions. All are important. But how all of us work in synchronization is something which is very, very important. Rather than saying CRPs can replace the entire scientific system, we need to look at how both can work together. I think that is very, very important. Today, the whole battle also seems to be about criticizing institutions and organizations. But can we look at how organizations also make a transition? Expecting that farmers will make a transition, but the institutions will continue to do what they are doing is also not going to work. So we also need to look at how organizations make transition. So how ICR institutions make transitions, how NGOs can make a transition, how business organizations, how input industry can make a transition is also something which is very, very important. If all of them don't make a transition, but if we expect farmers to make a transition, is not also going to happen. Similarly, coming to the technology. See, technology is something which is which, as many people say, is a neutral, but it is not neutral. It works in a particular condition, and it works. It has its own limitations as well. It facilitates, and what is good, say 60 years back, may not be good today. Similarly, what is 1000 years back good may not be good today. So battle should not be between what is good 1000 years back versus what is good 70 years back, but the battle should be in terms of our entire approach should be in terms of what is good for us for the next 50 years, the challenges which we are going to face with. So there actually comes in the more important thing is about the biological systems. The last 70 years or before that, we have not largely focused on understanding the biological systems, the natural processes which are happening in the nature, and then how do we synchronize agricultural practices towards that. Not very much understood scientifically. So we need to put effort in terms of understanding them. Also, how do we create values? So when we are talking about curating the practices, whether we talk about validation of the practices, there are certain values which we all commonly need to agree upon. And then how do we do that is something which is very important. If you continue to measure the success of natural farming also in terms of only yield, it is not going to help. So we also need to look at how do we value and how do we cost the externalities, and then based on that, how do we look at the transition is something which is very important. That's the transition which is required, which we need to look at. So I'm saying these are the 6 approaches, particularly when it comes to the crop production. We need to look at water and moisture management, adaptive cropping patterns, nutrient management, pest management, organic seed management. I'm not trying to break them into yield. If soils are organically managed, there will not be problem of water, or there will not be problem of pests, which is not true. Similarly, growing rice extensively in areas which is not suitable and then growing organically also makes no sense. So we need to look at all these things together. That's what is the core issue. So unless we look at it together, we are not going to find a solution. And if we are looking at together also, we need to look at these can only be implemented properly if there is a proper support services available. It could be extension service, it could be input supply, it could be diagnostic services, all that kind of thing. Support services are required. Similarly, forward linkages in terms of market prices, which is also very, very critical. So if you look at water and moisture management, one of the very important thing is cropping pattern should be based on the local water, local weather, and natural resources available. So based on the soil type, etc. Today across the country, only 2 or 3 crops are growing in area. So Telangana is largely paddy and cotton. Maharashtra, if you look at, largely sugarcane and cotton. So like that, if you take states, we are only promoting 1 or 2 crops. How do we move away from that and then move into cropping patterns which are suitable for the local water availability is something which is very, very important. So crop water budgeting is not only at the farm level and village level, we should probably look at the district level and the state level and then see based on the rainfall what is the best way to do it. Similarly, when we talk about rainwater harvesting, there are a number of methods where at the farm level you can harvest the water, and between the farms at an area level you can harvest the water. And there are new practices which have come up where you can harvest atmospheric moisture as well. So learning from the chana cultivation, so the chickpea cultivation in winter, you all know the dew drops accumulate on the leaves. So if you look at, if there is a crop which can be grown as a cover crop, which has very small leaves closely covering the soil, there is a lot of moisture which can be harvested, and that can be used for making the growing the crop. And then that's what is used in Andhra Pradesh as PMDS, pre-monsoon dry sowing. And similarly, by increasing soil organic matter, we can also increase the water holding capacity of the soil. So your water requirement may go down significantly. Crop requires moisture. Crop doesn't require water. It requires moisture. So how do we manage moisture is something which is very, very important in the agriculture. So more will be talked about by other speakers. So adaptive cropping patterns is about crop soil type, water availability, and weather parameters. Increasing cropping intensity horizontally, vertically through crop rotations, intercrops, multiple crops, crops is something which is very, very important. So that requires a design. Like I mentioned, one of the very important learning from the recent agroecological experiments across the world is that managing living roots in the soil. So if you can have plants growing in the soil for 365 days, the microbiome and then the root exudates will improve the soil fertility significantly. So when we are talking about adaptive cropping patterns, we need to look at how that can be managed. It can be through cover crops, it could be the intercrops, it could be through the staggered production which we do, or the polycrops which we do. So whatever model of cropping pattern we follow, but as long as we can manage the living roots in the soil, it helps. So when it comes to the soils, this I'll take a bit more time to talk about, because that's where actually the most of the controversies are there. So physical management of soil as well as the biological and chemical properties, managing them is something which is very, very important. So we need to look at how do we improve the soil quality. So to improve the soil quality, we need to prevent the erosion, we need to prevent the compaction. Much of the compaction is coming from the heavy vehicles which you are using in terms of either preparing the soil or in terms of harvesters which we are using, that huge compaction which is happening. Also the puddling which is done in paddy causes huge compaction. So we need to move away from many of these practices to have better. So basically I'm trying to say is we need to manage physical factors very much. So we need to prevent erosion, we need to prevent compaction. Much of them are caused by the bad practices which we are following. So the frequent tilling, puddling, all these causes soil to lose its physical properties. Particularly in the paddy where we are doing puddling, soil destruction is happening. We need to cut down on that as well. So the soil structure, the aggregate stability, water holding capacity, all these are being damaged because of these things. Similarly, there is a reduction in the soil organic carbon, and then we can move towards biological nutrient management. So here, say a plant, this is the basics of organic or natural farming which we need to understand. Of the 50 to 70 elements which are found in the living beings, only about 15 are the major ones. And in that we have the micronutrients, basic nutrients, the secondary micronutrients, as well as the other things. So in this, largely where do we get them is an important issue. So where do we get them? So 95% of the nutrients comes from carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So in this, CHO, the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen actually comes from air and water. So this is a NPK is what we are focusing today largely through the chemical fertilizers. Next, please. But what is very critical is the 5% of the secondary and micronutrients, which are very, very critical, which are not available to the plants because of the way we are actually doing the practices. So here what we need to look at is the source of nutrients is very, very important. Expecting that everything can be applied from outside or soil can provide is not going to happen. See, what soil provides is either from the organic matter which soil has or from the mineral matter which soil has. So if the soil doesn't have the particular, say the soil is deficient in iron, no matter of microbes can provide you iron there. It actually comes from the organic matter which is provided there. So this balancing of nutrients and making them available to the plant is something which is very, very important. So in these practices, we are not actually following, we are actually missing out on this front. So balanced nutrition which is available is something which is very, very important. Modern agriculture believes that all these nutrients can be supplied from outside, while organic farming, natural farming believes all these are available in the soil. Both are wrong. Both are wrong. All these nutrients are not present in the soil. It depends on the mineral matter. It depends on the amount of organic matter available in the soil. It depends on the biological properties of the soil. Whereas, depending on that, we need to make your package of practices. So in soils which are deficient in iron, if you go on adding on only the organic matter and not adding on the iron, it's not going to work. Similarly, zinc or potash may be available in the soil, but they may not be available in the available form. So when we talk about soils management, we need to take a very scientific approach. So nutrients conversion from one form to another happens either through chemical process or through the biological process. So we need to look at what is the current condition of the soil, and based on that, practices should be designed. I think that is the most critical part, and here there is a lot of missing links which we are unable to do. So the scientific institutions should bring in this knowledge, and there are already best practices across the country about how organic can be practiced. So basically the physical, chemical and biological properties are something which we need to look at together for when it comes to the soil health. And just application of microbial solutions is not going to help unless you increase the soil organic matter. Unless we increase the soil organic matter. Even when we talk about soil organic matter, unless the CN ratio is proper, though 70:30 carbon nitrogen ratio is there in the organic matter, it is not going to decompose properly as well. So these things we are unable to formulate properly when we talk about natural farming or organic farming, because many of the proponents are just believing that by putting in organic matter or by adding on soil microbial solutions, everything will be solved. It is not happening because the chemical properties, particularly the pH and the EC, are varying, and the CN ratio of the organic matter is varying. So the composition of these things is very, very important when it comes to the practices. So we need to look at that. Similarly, when there is a problem with the physical properties, also there are issues. So soil amendments initially is also something which is very, very critical. So what we try to look at is the microbial solutions which are used in agriculture. So particularly the indigenous microbial solutions, whether we talk about Panchagavya, whether we talk about Jivamrit, whether we talk about Amrita Gel, we try to look at what these solutions are and then what they can do to the soil and how do we improvise them. So if you look at the commonalities of all these products, they are basically using cattle dung. So the cattle dung has microorganisms which are present in the gut of the animal. So that contains cellulose, lignin solubilizing bacteria, nitrogen fixing, phosphorus solubilizing endobacteria, and some which are helpful in pest and disease management as well. So the animal dung has these microorganisms which is coming from the gut. Similarly, when we are adding buttermilk, we are adding lactobacillus. If we are adding toddy, we are adding another set of microorganisms. If we are adding soil, then we are adding Pseudomonas, Rhizobium, Agitobacter kind of thing. So these microorganisms get multiplied by using the nutrients of sugars, fats and proteins which are added either as jaggery, either as oil cakes or as pulse flours. So all these principles, if you look at from biodynamic solutions to Jivamrit to Amrita Gel to Panchagavya, All these follow the same principle. So even the Korean natural farming also follows the same principle. So all of them use dung as a source, soil as a source, or any fermented liquid as a source, and then we ferment them, multiply the microorganisms, and then apply to the soils. So when we are looking at from that, locally made solutions are far better compared to the commercially available solutions, because the local microorganisms are well adapted to the soil, local conditions. If you can't make them, you can buy from the outside. If you can't make on your own, a group can make for you. So we can set up some bio enterprises which can make them and supply, or commercially available microorganisms contain the same microorganisms. So there is no much difference between whether we talk about waste decomposer, whether we talk about phosphorus solubilizing. So all these microbial solutions have more or less same microorganisms. So how do we multiply and make them available at an affordable price to the farmers is something which is very, very important. So if you are using local ones, it is better because they are adapted to the local soil conditions, they are adapted to the local weather conditions, and they also represent the local microbial diversity. So that makes it better. That doesn't mean if you don't have them, you should not use others. So you can also use other things. Similarly, all these can work only if there is enough soil organic matter. And to have enough organic matter, you can follow mulching, you can follow composting, you can recycle the crop residues, you can use green manures. But 7 to 8 tons of biomass added to the soil is very, very critical. If it is not added, it is not going to help. So simply saying compost is bad, vermicompost is bad, or NADAP composting is bad doesn't help. So either you do mulching or you do composting, add crop residues or green manures. We need to follow the addition of biomass to the soil. So in addition to the adding in the microbial solutions, adding the biomass is something which is very, very important. Similarly, when it comes to the animals, dung from any animal which is ruminant is always good, because these microorganisms are present in the gut, which helps it in digestion. And if you analyze the microbial profile of Desi or Videsi, male or female, more or less it is similar. There could be variance in the fresh dung, but when it comes to the beneficial microorganisms which are present in the dung, which can be cultured outside the animal body, which we do in the process of Jivamrut, Panchagavya or Amritajal preparation, in that the microbial profiling is more or less similar. The variance is less than 5%, and a buffalo use its dung. If you have a crossbred, use its dung. But if you want to buy new one, buy local animals, because local animals are well adapted to the local conditions. So if you're buying something, buy local animals, buy cows which are easy to manage. Buffaloes are difficult to manage in particularly the rain-fed conditions, because they're water buffaloes, they need water or mud for cooling their body. So looking at your conditions, you can make a choice of the animals, but don't get carried away by saying only if Desi cow is there, you can do it. Only Jivamritam is good, not Amritajal or Panchagavya. So all of these things are equally good. Make any of the product which is suitable for your growing conditions. So I tried to make a table from different approaches, including the conventional approaches. And if you put all of them together, all talks about the same thing. Add 4 to 5 tons of farmyard manure, or add 4 to 6 tons of biomass as compost or mulching, or achadan. So everybody talks about adding this kind of biomass. And your nitrogen, phosphorus, potash largely comes from in the conventional agriculture, while they add through the chemical fertilizers. In the organic manures, biofertilizers, or the natural farming, we add them through the microorganisms. So the microorganisms can only convert the existing nutrients from unavailable form to available form. They themselves are not nutrients. So the availability of the functioning of these microorganisms largely depends on the availability of the biomass. And there actually we are missing out. If we can focus on this, we can certainly do better when it comes to the soils management. Similarly, when it comes to the organic seed systems, it is not Desi or improved varieties which are good. Largely conventional varieties are selected for chemical fertilizer responsiveness. As a result, when we are using them in organic growing conditions, they are not doing properly. But if we can make selections, it will be always good. since they're already selected for high yielding, if you can make selections in organic growing conditions, their yields also will increase. So we certainly need to revive the traditional varieties and native varieties, but again we need to look at the value for cultivation and use of these seeds. So some seeds, some varieties have low yield, some varieties have low quality, some improved varieties also have low quality. So looking at from that point of view, we need to regenerate the new data of value for cultivation and use. And in organic or natural farming conditions, no GMOs are allowed because of the biosafety issues. So either improved varieties or desi varieties can be used in these systems. But what is more important is, in addition to generating this kind of data, institutionalizing the production and distribution of these things is very, very important. So we need to create value for the diversity also. So developing more processing, value addition products for these things are very, very important. Similarly, very critical and important is the pest and disease management. We are completely missing on that. There is a false belief that if we move towards organic, pest and diseases are not a problem, which is not true. Moving towards organic conditions can improve the resistance in the plants, but the pests and diseases also comes in because of the larger ecosystem in which the crop is grown. So if the neighboring farmers are growing crops which are pest intensive, obviously your pest increases. So this year, for example, when there is a black thrips in chilies, the black thrips infected organic chili crop as well. But where pest management was done effectively, it could be managed efficiently. So we need to also follow proper pest management practices. So when we talk about proper pest management practices, it is about moving towards an ecological balance, identifying initially. So use traps to identify. So we need to have farmer level or a village level pest and disease monitoring, based on which you can actually have the curative measures. So the curative measures in terms of managing the pests or using botanicals or microbial solutions, there are a number of products which are already available, which people can make locally or buy from the markets. What is important is the surveillance. So if the surveillance system is established well at the farm level using the light traps, color traps, or pheromone traps, because insects are attracted towards color, light, or smell. So based on that, these traps are developed. So we can use them and monitor them and also control them. There are a number of practices which to control them as well. Similarly, there is a lot of preventive care mechanisms like the flowers which are yellow in color, because many of the insects gets attracted to yellow color. Like that, there are a number of practices. So the non-pesticidal management has compiled a number of practices which can help to reduce the pest incidence itself. And then if there is an attack, how to manage them. So that's something which is very important, which we need to also. So again, integrating the livestock, again, I said earlier, when we talk about a livelihood, we need to look at integrating all these as very important ones. So whatever animal people has, their residues can be used in agriculture. So we don't need to worry about only whether we need to use buffalo or cow or desi or videsi kind of thing. Whatever you have, you can use it. And this is a soil organic carbon data. And then recently, Government of India also released a report which said from nearly about 1%, soil organic matter has come down to about 0.2, 0.3% kind of thing. So we need to worry about it. We need to certainly improve the soil organic carbon. If the soil organic carbon is not increased, soil organic matter is not increased, all these which we talked about as shift towards organic and natural farming is not going to happen. So if this has to happen, increasing soil organic matter is very important. Soil organic carbon is an indirect way of assessing how much organic matter soil has. And this also helps. Soil organic carbon increase is also potentially a way of sequestering carbon dioxide which is available in the atmosphere. So it also absorbs and then puts into the soil. So for carbon sequestration also it helps. So we made a small estimation how much built up of soil organic carbon helps in terms of carbon credits. So by using satellite imagery, we can and then if you can ground truth it using PGS data, the data shows that 0.1% increase in the soil organic carbon can translate to about 2.9 tons of carbon dioxide stored per acre. So it's a sequestering about 2.9 tons. So which means about 3 tons of carbon sequestration happens with 0.1% increase in the soil organic carbon. So if 0.1% can increase can be quantified, and then if it can be added to the carbon credit, it comes to somewhere around 3 credits per acre. And so currently it is valued at $10, so it comes to about 2,100 rupees per acre. So that's what if you calculate from a ecosystem services point of view. We also tried to do the carbon equivalent emissions from crop yields from conventional and organic and natural growing conditions in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So in paddy, we can have the highest reduction by moving towards organic and natural. It is about nearly about 50% reduction. So 42% reduction is possible by making a transition towards organic and growing conditions. And this transition is not only on the chemical fertilizers and pesticides, but also on the water use. So reducing water use by over 50% by moving towards system of rice intensification or aerobic paddy growing is something which is also very important. Similarly, on the wheat, the reduction could be around 23%, groundnut it is about 41%, tomatoes it is about 41%, papaya it is about 48%. For various crops, we try to calculate how much emission reduction is possible. So this transition is on multiple factors, and largely chemical fertilizer use, water use, and energy use. These three are something which are very, very important. Similarly, when it comes to the market, again, there is a lot of debate about how to understand markets. There is a growing market certainly for organic and natural products, but the terms and conditions in local market would be very different from the domestic and urban markets and compared to global organic markets. So these three have certain opportunities and at the same time certain terms and conditions which we need to look at, because the logistics vary, quality requirements vary, the premium available varies, and the competition varies. So depending on that, we need to have good strategies for market as well, and then that market strategy should start from the day one when you are actually making the transition also, because many of these requires your data management. So in India, we have two kinds of systems. One, we talk about participatory guarantee system. We also talk about ICS system, which is based on the NPOP standards. So either of the systems can be followed for managing the quality standards. And the local market in the rural areas is very little, and largely it is for the grains. And the premium available is also very lower. We talk about local markets, we should strengthen the local markets, but when it comes to the prices for farmers, it's very low. Domestic urban markets are growing. It is growing by over 30% every year, and there is a good amount of organic premium available. And so I'm trying to say is there is a local market, there is a domestic market, domestic urban market in India. There is also a global market. So when we are looking at these three, the requirements vary. So there are logistics, there is quality requirements, there is a certification systems. Accordingly, there is a premiums vary, but there is also different competitions. If I have to sell in American market has its own system of quality management. So the certification systems have changed significantly, which were not there earlier. They brought in today. And so if you are focusing on Indian local market, focus on participatory guarantee system. If you are targeting about the global market, we need to move towards NPOP system. So these certification systems are important if you are capturing the markets. And if you can sell locally, you can sell locally, but the quantum of produce you can sell in the very local market directly is very little. So farmers selling directly is always exempted from certification systems. So there's a lot of myth that certification is thrusted onto the people. Not true. Certification is mandatory only if third party sells products in the market. If farmer sells directly in the market up to 12 lakh rupees per annum, farmers are exempted from certification if they can sell directly. But the market size is very small because in the local market, others are also growing the same crop. So obviously there is no much demand in the local market. So we need to move towards domestic urban markets. Many times farmers may not be able to sell directly, so they sell through other organizations. So the moment other organizations picks it up, beyond 12 lakh rupees sales, certification is made mandatory. They can follow PGS certification or an ICS certification system, which is based on the NPOP system. So if you look at also the size of the markets, very initially, India largely is about the textile market. Cotton was the major crop, but today it is organic food which is grown significantly. So export market is around 11,050 crores. The total market size is about 14,050 crores. In 2021, and in this large part of it is organic food. 7,800 crores is the organic food itself, and the domestic market is also growing significantly. And in the domestic market, organized retail sector's share is around 2,000 crores, but equal share is also the farmers who sell directly without any certification. So this is also around 1,800 crores. So depending on where you want to sell, how you want to sell, you also need to follow the concerned legal system of managing the data. That is very, very important. So the markets are growing at 30% per year, and it is expected to reach around $4 billion across the world. And the Indian market, organic market, is going to double in the next 4 years. That's what the predictions are. And compared to any other sector, this is the largest growth in the business. So if you want to capture this, following proper legal systems is also very, very important. If you want to capture the farmers market where farmers can sell directly, you also need to prepare for that. How do you sell directly to the consumers? If you want to capture the organized domestic market, there's a certain systems which you need to follow. Similarly, if you want to do export market, then there is additional systems to follow. I'm trying to say, in India, organic market is around 14,050 crores per annum, and it is growing at 30% per annum. And domestic market is 3,800 crores, in which 2,000 crores is the organized domestic market, and farmers market is around 1,800 crores. This is farmers selling directly to the consumers. In India, farmers are exempted from any certification system up to 12 lakh rupees per annum. And the export market is largely based on the international organic certification, and every country has its own requirements. So today, EPIDA certification is not sufficient to sell in the international market. We need to have additionally from the particular country's certification. Say, for example, if I have to sell in US, I have to get approval from the USDA. If I have to sell in the Europe, I have to get the European Union certification separately. So EPIDA certification is no more valid to sell in the international market. We need to get an additional certification for that from this year onward. 2022 has changed the rules. 2021 onwards, the rules have changed significantly. So there is a growing market, but to capture the market, you need to also follow certain legal systems. So while one part of the entire work is about understanding the scientific principles and then the natural processes and then what kind of practices can help farmers to make a transition, second part of it is also about understanding the markets and then dealing with the markets and different kinds of certification systems available and what strategies we need to follow to capture these markets. So rather than looking at all these things only through an emotional attachment, can we look at it as a system, and then how do we adapt to the system, or what changes in the system can help us to capture these markets is something which is very, very important. So this is what I explained also. So the future is going to be about the world trade is going to cross $150 billion in the next 4 to 5 years. And India, even if it targets about 2% of the global trade, we will have 25,000 crores, which is nearly double the current market size. It is going to increase significantly. And local market is also growing significantly. From today's 1,800 crores, the farmers market may reach about 3,500 crores in the next 4 years. Similarly, the domestic market from 2,000 crores may reach about 5,000 crores. So we are going to exponentially grow in the market. So when the growth happens exponentially in the market, if farmers and farmers groups and farmer cooperatives are not prepared to capture that, again the middlemen, again the new business entities will capture this market. So we need to be prepared to capture this market as well, and it requires certain preparation from the farmers and farmers cooperatives as well. Yeah. So there are technologies, tools available. We don't need to follow, no need to go through the earlier cumbersome process of soil testing. Today we have rapid soil testing kits available. We have digital tools available. We can use all of them in terms of doing the soil testing and then making this transition possible. These can be the support services available at the field level. We have at the FPO level rapid soil testing, and based on which organic transition plans are prepared for the individual farmers, or at the village level or an FPO level. We started doing this, and then it clearly showing good results. This is again developing microbial solutions, microbial cultures which are commercially available, which can be made locally and then supplied to the farmers. So we made this, and then now they are available at the farmers at a much affordable price. And in addition to the farm level bio inputs made and available to the farmers, there are mother cultures which are available for the biofertilizers. So this is something which is really doing well. And CSA is also a PGS regional council. Today we have among the 7 lakh hectares under PGS certification in the country, CSA does about 1 lakh hectares. So nearly 1/7 of the total organic PGS certification in India is done by CSA, and in many states it is happening. So an individual producer or a group of producers or an area can get an certification. They can get certification for annual crops, perennial crops, livestock, beekeeping, wild collections, or processing and handling. So any of these things they can get a certification. We also started a Sahajaram producer company, which is a aggregation of organic producers in the farmer cooperatives, which we have promoted. They are into retail market and they sell directly to the consumers. And very important is about how much share of the consumer's price goes to the farmer. So this entire retail business which Sahajaram producer company has built gives about 50 to 60% of the consumer's price to the farmers. And today Sahajaram is also into international market. We are in the US market and UK market. Yeah. And when we talk about knowledge building and skill building, there are several courses which we have already developed, and there are online courses available on GrameenAcademy.in. This is a online portal which we run, and we also partner with various universities in developing the courses. Currently, the 3 universities we are starting organic and natural farming course integrated with the BSc Agriculture, and also a diploma course in organic and natural farming and FPO management. These 2 we are launching this current season, and there are courses which individual farmers or field teams which are working with farmers can use. They are available on the GrameenAcademy.in. We are also setting up a center of excellence on agroecology near Vijayawada. This is a 36 acres campus where research and education happens. So we are building a stay facility and a training center for accommodation for about 80 people. So 2 batches of training can happen regularly. So this is near Vijayawada, and we are also trying to partner with various institutions across the world in promoting a scientific approach towards organic and natural farming. So what we need, this is the last slide. So for scaling up natural farming, what we need is a phased and targeted approach. May not focus on all regions, may not focus on all crops, may not focus on all population segments, but all are suitable. But we need to have a strategy in terms of how do we plan it, given the local condition. Similarly, it could be entire agriculture moving towards good agriculture practices, towards pesticide free and towards organic. That can be a strategy which can be adopted rather than fighting whether organic can solve the problem. Similarly, strengthen and generate robust local evidence, which is very, very important. Different agroecological conditions needs local solutions. Similarly, focus on local innovations, focus on customization of the standard practices to the local conditions, which is very important. What works in Anantapur may not work in Godavari district. So that adaptation is something which is very important. Focus on saturation. So when we focus on a village, see that the entire village make a transition. Landscape approach works. When 70 to 80% of transition happens, the ecological systems works better. Rather than managing an individual farm, managing a ecosystem is much easier. So that's something which is important. And again, enabling support services are very critical. So FPOs, bio enterprises, certification systems, seed systems, all can be the support systems. Green revolution happened because of such systems approach. So this natural farming system transition also can happen only if we can have that enabling support services. And using practicing farmers in extension is very, very important. Many of us have already tried these things. We should use community extension system. At the same time, it's also very important for the scientific system to make a transition. If they don't make a transition, and if we expect everything will change, if we have a CRP in the village, it is not going to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was really a very comprehensive presentation, and probably in the most simple way, you made us understand the concept of natural farming. And probably this presentation will also help each one of us clearing doubt and confusion related to the basic understanding of natural farming, particularly when different practices are available, and also integration of livestock, because many times there is confusion that when we are speaking about livestock, what kind of livestock to be integrated, particularly with the concept of natural farming. But as you clarified that maybe with some 4 to 5% of variation, the basic ingredients, whatever kind of livestock you speak about, whether desi, videsi, buffalo, cow, is going to remain same. So that definitely will help. And the basic understanding is that when you are speaking of a concept like this, natural farming, so basically it's about using of bioproducts, making the inputs available, and to what extent you are actually internalizing. So in case of natural farming, is just fully internalizing the availability of inputs, and then so many other things related to, as I mentioned, bioproducts, then crop choices, and of course the indigenous microbial solution. You also clarified on that, because different approaches are available when you are speaking about preparation of these microbiological solution. So thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. And now it's open for discussion.
You can read out the question, I can answer this.
Yeah, play.
So the first question, sir, is whether the market for organic and natural farming product is different, or both are being sold as same in the domestic as well as international market.
See, international market, you can get about 30 to 40% premium. Domestic market, it is about 10 to 15% premium. So premium varies depending on the market. And then each market has a different certification. So with the PGS system, you can sell in the domestic market, you can get about 10 to 15% premium. And when you are selling in the international market, it needs the particular country certification. So if you are selling in Canada, you need a Canadian certification. If you need to sell in US, you need a USDA certification. So depending on the market where you are selling, you need that particular certification in addition to the Indian certification. So that's where issue stands. The premium is about 30 to 40%, and again, premium varies with product. And also, premium varies with where you are selling. Say, if I'm exporting directly to the US market, I may get about 60 to 70%. If I'm following an FOB approach, I may get about 10 to 15%. So, depending on how you sell, because market is something which we need to understand as market, because market has its own principles. Like we talked about biological principles, market also has market principles. So depending on how many activities we are taking up, we get the kind of premium price we get. But certainly there is a demand, there is a big growing demand. About 30% growth is what we observed for organic food in the international market. And in Indian market also, it is growing at 28 to 30%. So certainly there is a market. Yes, local agriculture universities have not yet included because the framework of understanding is not there. So that's where we are trying to, as a pilot in 3 universities as a course, now we are trying to do, but that would be available on the Grameen Academy as well. So people can, others can also follow the same course syllabus. So the content will be available, and any other university, if they want it also, we can partner and do it. And I was also talking to manage, so we can also do some of these courses together for teachers also. So how to understand, do these things kind of. And how the quantity of nutrients from different sources can be assessed. There's a methodology available. Tapan, I can certainly share that with you. Can certainly share with you about the methodology, how to assess the nutrients. Do we need separate certification for organic and natural farming? No. Whether you follow organic, natural farming, and everything, it is the same certification system. The product, we need to follow the same set of standards. And similarly, there is a question about farmers selling directly are exempted. Yes, farmers selling directly are exempted. So consumers can buy, if the consumers have a trust on a particular farmer, they can buy directly. So if there is a question, then it's a farmer who has to prove it, that they are following natural farming or organic farming. But if it's a third party involved, then there is a certification system which is available.
Yeah. They are asking to whom they have to approach for certification.
For certification, there are PGS. For PGS, there are PGS regional councils. There are 52 PGS regional councils in India. Government National Center for Organic Farming accredits these PGS councils. So, like I mentioned, CSA is one of the PGS regional councils. So, anyone who wants certification can approach us, or we in your state, whichever PGS regional council is available, you can do. We do in 12 states. Agri clinics can certainly be used in this whole process. So if we can combine the recommendations for organic and growing conditions into the soil testing, the recommendations can be very well made for the organic transition. So whoever is interested can connect to us so that we can talk about it. The yield coming down with natural farming, we keep hearing this question, and this question comes in because soils are not well managed. If you can manage well the soils in organic and natural conditions, also you can get the similar yield. Even in the conventional agriculture, the yield variations are very high. So the yield variations comes in from the soil conditions. So if you can manage your soils, it can be done very well. PGS is for local market, so it is accredited by NCI, whereas EPIDA accredited agencies are for NPOP certification. And from this year onwards, 2021, again I am repeating, for 2021 onwards, it is EPIDA's accredited agencies are not sufficient for export market. You need accredited agencies from USDA for US market, European Union for European market. EPIDA is no more the agency which accredits for export. There are a number of agencies which buy from farmers. So if you have proper certification, you can get certification.
Some local agriculture universities have not included on natural or organic methods.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. So we need to look at how this content can be developed and added into the syllabus. Unless education system changes, it's not going to help. So we need to also focus on changing the course curriculum. So probably we should have one more round of discussion with the agriculture universities how these conditions can be improved.
Yeah, certification, there are so many questions.
Yes. So I think there is one session on certification separately available, and probably one of the days, if there are more questions which are not answered in any of these sessions, I can do it on the last day if required.
Yeah. This farmer selling, one question, farmer selling directly exempted from certification. How can non-organic ones be differentiated? What is the assurance?
See, it is a trust on the farmer. So when farmer is selling directly, if you trust the farmers, you can buy, and if the farmers can sell to the consumer, they can sell. So that's what is the system, up to 12 lakh rupees per annum. So if the farmer is selling anything more than 12 lakh rupees per annum, they also need to get certified mandatorily. Otherwise, any food sold in the market which is claimed to be organic needs to be certified. That's what the rules say.
Yeah, there is one question. Though organic farming and natural farming is more or less similar, is there any successive farmers or FPOs that purely following natural farming? If it is so, about the cost-benefit ratio. What is the cost-benefit ratio of natural?
Across the country, there are lakhs of farmers who are following both the practices, organic and natural farming. And if you look at the cost benefits, the yield variations are about 5 to 10%, and the cost variations are also about 5 to 10%. And it depends on the market price also, depending on all these things. If we can draw largely a common understanding common results from all these experiences across the country, yield variation can be reduced to less than 5% if you can follow a proper approach for soil management. And proper seeds, if you can use 5 to 10%, less than 5 to 10% yield variation can be brought in. In terms of cost reduction, it will be anywhere between 15 to 20% cost reduction, because if you are not buying inputs from outside. And in the market premium, it could be about 10%. So together, it could be a benefit of about 20 to 25% for the farmers.
Yeah, and one more is we use agri clinics, particularly for soil testing, etc. services in combination with information and communication technology to monitor and help farmers in both conventional and natural farming. How we can use these agri clinics and information technologies in the natural farming.
So, like I mentioned earlier, see, currently the recommendations are all chemical recommendations. So we can make a shift towards organic and natural farming recommendations also. If we can bring together the agri clinics, we can discuss with them and then develop a methodology for that. We certainly develop a methodology for that. We are already doing it, so we can certainly work on that. The recommendations based on the soil testing, what are the best organic and natural farming practices which can be followed. Similarly, for the certification of inputs, there is no market, there is no certification system PGS available, but on the MPOP system, there is a certification system available. We are discussing with the NCOF to come up with a PGS system for agri inputs as well, for seeds and agri inputs as well. So it may take time, but it's going to come in.
Yeah, this is on the other hand, every scientist of their opinion that natural farming yield will come down. What is your opinion there, say?
See, that's a point. See, many times the natural farming is equated with what Subhash Palekar articulated as ZBNF, which is not the case. So there are a number of other practices which are also followed. So we need to go beyond that, and then we need to understand soil requires organic matter, soil requires microorganisms, soil requires other fauna and flora in the soil, and that can come in by stopping chemical fertilizers and increasing soil organic matter. If these two can be done, much of the improvement can happen, and that's what even the integrated nutrient management talks about. So use scientific principles. Okay. Soil science in the agriculture universities is based on 1920s, 1930s principles. There are 2020 principles which are available. The science of soils management has improved significantly. The agroecological approaches have brought in new science into picture. So understand that. So need to take these approaches forward. Scientists following a scientific approach towards organic natural farming is also very important, not based on their own understanding of conventional agriculture from 1920 theories. So follow 2020 theories. I would say that's what is very important.
PGS are free, whereas there are many accredited agencies for exports.
Correct. So EPIDA accredited agencies for NPOP certification are available, but that is not sufficient for exports because the rules have changed now. For exports, you need to get accreditation from the USDA. For US exports, you need to get certification from USDA. You have to export to Europe, you have to get certification from European Union. Unfortunately, the agencies approved by USDA are different from the agencies approved by European Union. All this happened last year because of the collapse of the certification systems. So there's a new systems which are being built up now.
Okay. Nowadays, everyone claims his product is organically grown. Posed one question.
Yes. So obviously that's where certification systems comes into picture. That's why Government of India made it mandatory to have a certification. So
yeah.
No, that's one of the reasons the certification is made mandatory now.
Which was easier to follow, organic or natural farming?
See, depend on the resources you have. Like I said, there is no big difference between the two. Don't actually try to see the differences. Say, if you want to make Jivamrut versus Amrutajal, I would say Amrutajal is easy to make compared to Jivamrut even. So if you can make your own Jivamrut is much easier and cost effective. But if you don't have time, buying waste decomposer is also equally good. So don't go by a very generalized generalization. Look at what is good for you.
Yeah, is exclusive package of practices is available for organic or natural production?
Of course, they are available for state-wise practices are available. NCOF has published, the Meerut Cropping System Research has published, CSA has published, many have published. The data is available.
Which system is, okay, 1 second. Trust is rare commodity nowadays. As
That's
you know.
why that's why certification comes into picture.
Yeah.
There is a question. There are two questions. One question is about the animals, variances in the animals. Yes, there are. The data is published. Data is available. I can share the papers with you. And another is the indispensable problem of weed management. Of course, weeds are a problem. So weed management also requires preventive care. So, like I talked about NPM, we also need to follow a preventive care. There is a non-chemical approaches for weed management also. There are practices which are available, which can be certainly be practiced.
Yeah, this authentic organic inputs are not available in the market. How to ensure authenticity?
That's what I said. So currently, for the commercially available inputs, there is a certification system which is available, but there is no PGS system, or for locally sold inputs, locally made inputs, there is no certification system. I think which is understandable. If you are selling locally, then there is no need of verification. But if you are selling in the market, then there should be some mechanism. So we were discussing with NCOF about setting up a PGS system, which can also validate the inputs which are sold in the markets, or the biofertilizers sold by local entrepreneurs.
This one, if we want to generalize in a layman point of view, how is organic different from natural farming, as both are the same and at the same time very different also?
Not very different, both are same. Don't get into differences. It's actually more or less same. Particularly in Indian condition, not much different.
Yeah, this one is particularly, as you have stated, there is no such difference in using cow dung of Desi or Videsi cows or buffaloes. Does this findings are scientifically validated?
Yes, there are papers published available, and you can check on our websites where you can get. We have a website called Pestoscope where all pest management practices are there. It's a free website. There are all papers published available over there.
Yeah, this one is all the.
There's a mobile application also which you can download called Pestoscope.
In organic farming, indispensable problem is weed management. How to overcome this without much of expenses, since it is a labor intensive, and to have labor, yeah, it's very labor intensive.
Cropping system which we need to follow. So cover crops can help. Reducing salinity helps. Much of the weed problems today we see is because of the salinity problem. Weed can be managed if they can be managed initially. So before seeding, if you can remove the weeds, much of it can be addressed. There are practices which are available for weed management. Like we have soil management practices, like we have pest management practices. We also have weed management practices. Mulching significantly helps. So we need to have a comprehensive approach towards that.
Yeah, and this is one more question. Initially, few brands are coming under organic products. Later, the consumers are under inertia of the same without certification and being cheated.
Of course, see, you need to also verify. See, like I said, trust can be on a brand, trust can be on a certificate, trust can be on a farmer. So depending on whom you trust and then how the trust is established, how traceability is established, you need to follow that. So there are systems available, and legally it is now mandated that certification is mandated. So if some certification agencies are cheating, they will be blacklisted. This year, even Tatas were blacklisted because of cheating. So there is a robust certification system available in the country.
Yeah, I think
See, menus have low nutrient content. See, like I mentioned, biomass supplies certain nutrients, but microbes can also make immobile nutrients mobile. So it's a combination of nutrient available in the biomass and available in the soil, which are made available to the plants. So organic system combines both of them together. That's what we need to look at. So probably the soils session will talk about it. Otherwise, there is a publication on our website which you can look at. It is called Regenerative Soils. So there is a publication called Regenerative Soils.
yes, and, we have a session on yes, that's soil is one. Regenerative soil session is there. That is on 7th.
So see, like I said, you can follow many of these sessions will be talking about these practices, and if you have any doubts you can always connect to us. I already mentioned our email and phone number, and we also regularly do many of these sessions, and anytime if you want any clarification you can approach us. We can provide you as much information and as possible.
Yeah, this one more question, I think just now it has come. Like, is it visible for you, Dr. Ramu?
Yes. Can minimum amount of chemicals be used along with natural practices to qualify for natural farming? Certainly no. Certainly no. So as per the standards to sell as organic in the or natural in the market, you should not use any amount of chemicals. So basic principle is not using chemicals. So you can sell it as good agricultural practices if you are using a little bit of fertilizers, and if you are not using chemical pesticides, you can sell as pesticide free, but not as natural or organic in the market.
Okay. And some more people raised their hands. Yeah.
Renuka ma'am, there are some more questions in the Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Like, there are 5 more questions.
Yeah. How the farmers would get the problem specific help at the earliest?
See, we as far as CSA is concerned, we run a helpline. We also have mobile applications available as Pestoscope, which is for the pest and disease management. We also run a helpline. I'm putting the helpline number here. If they call within 12 hours, we can get back to them.
Yeah, even though farmers are growing products under natural farming, there is a problem in marketing. How to overcome this?
Like I mentioned, see, either they have to sell directly to the consumers or they can organize themselves and then look for buyers. So collectivization can certainly help. So if any one of you want to know more about markets, certainly can connect to us. I think there is a session on marketing which somebody else is dealing with. If you want to talk to CSA, we can certainly help on that. We regularly help many organizations.
Yeah, one more question. This is regarding potato production. Recently, we have seen wider range of potato production per unit of land.
Okay.
And then we want to identify the specific reasons of variability. How the services could be provided to identify the reasons of variabilities in production system of potato.
See, it requires proper scientific approach is what I would say. And at the field level, farmers require extension support. Proper extension support. It can be through entrepreneurs who are running agri clinics, or it could be community resource persons. So either of them, they can actually provide that kind of support services. It requires a very scientific approach and understanding of this. So there are confusions between organic and natural farming, which because of the narratives which people make. So we need to understand that from our own side. In the absence of certification mandatory, no. Certification is mandatory if third party has to sell in the market. It is mandatory now. See, if a farmers, if they are to sell directly to the consumers only, they are exempted to up to 12 lakh rupees. So certification is mandatory in this country.
To whom the farmers apply for sale of food or fodder crop?
Huh? Sorry.
To whom the farmers can apply for sale of food or fodder? Maybe commodities. I think to whom they
Commodity.
can.
So it's still depending on what commodity they have, what kind of certification they follow, there are a number of buyers. So, so there are a number of buyers which are available. And there is one question about Conab gel. Yes, there are a number of products. Like I mentioned, India has experimented with lot of products. So don't differentiate between the products. Each product has its own space. So we need to look at all these things. So the curated list of all these products are available on our website. We did a lot of trials with all these practices. They're available on our website if somebody is interested to know more about them. Yeah.
This is any policy of compensation or monetary benefits is there for farmers for to encourage natural farming.
See, under PKVY, there is a support available about 5,000 rupees per year for 3 seasons. So 15,000 rupees is available for farmers for making the transition. And I think which is a good, and then probably that can help the farmers to make a transition. But I would say in the long run, at least the equal amount of chemical fertilizers subsidy should go to the farmer. Then only it can help. Then only it can help. So we need to figure out how that can work.